Astrid Jorgensen is the director of Pub Choir, which is an organisation that grew up in Queensland and has been hugely successful. She and her accompanist, Waveney Yasso, go into pubs and basically divide the drinkers into parts, and over the course of the evening, direct them to sing in harmony. And when the pandemic struck, Pub Choir went online and it became couch choir. And it became a national, and I think even an international phenomenon, with singers around the nation and the globe participating. This experience of singing together was, in my view, hugely important. Because if you recall, when the lockdown began, it was very frightening. It was a frightening time. We didn't know if people would comply and wear their masks and stay inside or resist, and the disease would spread. Without public compliance, you cannot govern. So compliance was really the key to the success of our lockdown.
So it's not too good, but everything is so.
Oh, I was talking. So compliance was really the key to the success of our lockdown. The pandemic has revealed how important social cohesion is to maintaining the economy through times of crisis, and also the critical role that artists play in that. And Pub Choir is the perfect example of that. So please welcome Astrid Jorgensen, who's going to tell us about the mediocre path to greatness, or how embracing ordinary singing voices has blurred the line between artist and audience to produce extraordinary results.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Harriet. Thanks for having me. I actually, speaking of feeling inferior, I've listened on with great interest throughout today, and I have questioned whether I think I might go off script a little bit, because I don't know if I fully appreciated that I was in the company of so many artists. When I saw economics, like, I have to Google things like net and gross profit all the time. So I thought I would be explaining from scratch a couple of musical concepts, but I can see that I'm in the company of fellow artists. So excuse me if I go off script a little bit, but I listened with great interest just before the break. I didn't have my screen on, so I couldn't see who said it, but there was a conversation about, do we even pay artists? What is the point? And if, you know, what do we make art for? Who do we make art for? Is it the consumer or the artist themselves? And I think a different question to frame that conversation is, what if the consumer was also the artist? And so that is the starting point for where my experience with Pub Choir starts. Now, of course, you know, I think I might be the youngest person in the room. And so this is obviously a qualitative study on things that I myself have done, but I hope that it can offer some insights into other possibilities of how art can interact with the public and how we can survive. Because listening to the conversations before, it is not lost on me that I think Pub Choir is the only arts organisation I can think of that grew in size since the beginning of the COVID pandemic. It's a very small organisation. There's only 6 of us, but our audience has doubled, and we have never had any government funding. And I think the trajectory looks good. And I don't want any government funding. And so I thought I'd share some of the insights on how that's happened, because it's amazing to me still. So it's always a good opportunity to reflect. Back in 2017, which is when Pub Choir started, I was a high school teacher, desperately trying not to be a high school music teacher. And I felt that while I respect teaching greatly, and my father's a teacher, and, you know, it's such a difficult job, and, you know, all my admiration goes to school teachers. I felt like there was a big disconnect in what my students were experiencing of music in the world. It was so intertwined in their everyday life, and yet they would come into the classroom and tell me that they hated music. Now, that might be a reflection of being a really poor teacher, but even on my most self-deprecating moments, I think that there is more to it. So our experience of the arts is so fluid in life. And then when we go to create art ourselves with no guidance, most of the time, you know, kids are just going home and looking up YouTube clips and picking up a guitar for the first time. It's very disappointing to see the divide between what we like to consume and what we ourselves can naturally do. So school teaching always felt very complicated to me in that way that I worried I was ruining music for children. That's a very big burden to bear when you're 20 and in the classroom worrying that you are undoing their love of music. So I thought to myself, where is a more accessible way to make music with people? Because that's where I personally get the most meaning out of my life, making music with other people. And for me, it's always been choir. Singing is the most accessible musical activity that we can do by a long way. We all own the instrument. It's portable. We carry it with us at all times. It's free to use. You can literally just open your face and you are singing. So this seems an obvious place for me to start. And so I studied choral conducting at university. I've always had so much interest in the physical sensation of working in harmony with other people. And anything that I can do to give that sensation to other people, I think is worthwhile doing. So while I was a school teacher in 2017, I also had 7 choirs that I would take every evening. So it was a really busy time, but I was just desperate to see if I could transition from the classroom into a choral setting. There is no full-time choir job in Australia. So of course, we've talked about the gig economy already. You have to do as many things as possible, and it was very tiring, but exhilarating. But in 2017 was about the time it dawned on me that there was a problem that I couldn't shake from my mind once I noticed it, which was that the people in each of these 7 choirs, none of them looked like me. Now, that's not inherently a bad thing, but I just mean none of them reflected a peer of mine. I was, in 2017, I would have been 27, a young Asian woman, excited to make music with people like me, and every single person in all of my choirs was basically a semi-retired white person. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's what choirs look like in Australia. Or they are young children at school forced to join choir from their parents. There is this huge age divide and nothing in between. And I love singing. And like I said, it's so accessible. It's always crazy to me that people my age also wouldn't love singing. In fact, I was convinced that they would if I could just get them to come to choir. But of course, when you approach your friends and tell them to join your Tuesday night choir at the community church hall in Logan, in Brisbane, no one's coming. And so this problem I mulled over for some time, and I decided to make a list, which I think is the best thing I've ever done with my time in my life. I'm proud of myself. I decided to make a list of all of the roadblocks that I could see that was stopping my friends from joining my choir. Now, again, it could be that I just wasn't a very good choir director, but I thought I'll give it a crack. I'll write a list of everything that is a barrier. On that list included things like, I can remember it off the top of my head. People don't want to audition. Choir seems so exclusive to people. It's so embarrassing to have to ask to be accepted into this seemingly fun activity. Nobody wants to sing a solo because they feel embarrassed that their voice is not good enough. People can't necessarily read sheet music. They don't want to hang out at a church hall on a Saturday because they've never done that socially before. Not that there's anything wrong with a church hall, but that's not where we go to hang out with our friends on the weekend. Well, not for me anyway. And my friends didn't have time to regularly commit to the artistic practice, the acquisition of musical tools. They just wanted to have a fun time one time. They definitely didn't want to compete. And this is something that the arts has a real obsession with doing, which I'll come back to later. And the last thing was that I think they just thought it was generally lame. So looking at choirs, you know, there's often like a big satin sash. They don't want to wear an outfit. They don't want to call themselves by a weird name. They just want to go and relax. So I looked at this list, and it really occurred to me straight away that none of these things are necessary to achieving the best outcome of joining a choir, which is the joy of singing with other people. And so for the first time, I realized that although I had 7 choirs on the go, I was approaching each of them in the exact way that choirs are always approached in Australia, at least. And so I thought, what if I just disrupt that list? There is absolutely no reason to tick off those things. I don't think that they necessarily make for a better choral experience. And this is how pub choir was born. I literally ticked off each of those things thinking, is there a way that I can solve that? So in 2017 in March, I put out one social media post that said, look, I'm calling it pub choir and everyone's invited except children because it's at the pub. There are no auditions, there's no sheet music, no pressure, no worries. We'll sing one song and you already know it. I'll choose something that you like already. And at the end of the night, we'll never sing it again. You'll go home. And if it's $5 if you feel like it. So what I'm going to do, I'll share my screen to show you the crowd that turned up at the first pub choir. I hope I can share my screen. So this is the first pub choir event and 70 people came along. And I don't know if any of you are, I'll just quickly come back. Can you just nod if you can see it? Was that all right? Okay, yeah. Oh, you can't. You can see anything.
Just 1 second. Bella.
Yes.
Can we give Astrid some rights so she can share her screen, though?
Yeah, that's just been done, so she should be able to see
All
the
right,
share screen item now.
I'll have another look and see. I'll come back and you can tell me if. Right.
Perfect. We can see it now.
Oh,
awesome.
great. Okay, so there's pub choir's first session. 70 people rocked up to a really small pub in Brisbane in West End. And if you've been in a choir before, 70 is actually really a lot. I thought to myself, I've peaked, I've done it, I did it, I'll give up. And then fast forward a year, and this many people started coming to pub choir sessions. So within a year, people would literally line up around the block for hours in the rain. It was unbelievable to come to choir, and I would always be worried, do they know that it's a choir session? Do they know that they have to do the work when they arrive? And that's 3,000 people at City Hall in Brisbane. It's still difficult for me to talk about these numbers without feeling like I'm up my own ass, but these are just facts. This is a really big choir. In 2019, pub choir actually sold more tickets, I believe, I don't have the stats, but I'm pretty sure, more tickets in Australia than any other live musical act in Australia. We sold 70,000 tickets. It was a really big year in 2019. So hold on, I'll just stop sharing that for 1 second. So it really does beg the question. I mean, choir is not a new concept. We've been able to sing the whole time. Why would that many people choose to buy a ticket to a show where they have to do the work, not only do the work, but they have to sing in public in front of other people, which I think is a concept that most of us find terrifying. I think it has to be more than the list, right? I got rid of some barriers, but it made me reflect more deeply. And what I think is at the core of that initial success of pub choir is allowing the audience to be truly terrible at something with no consequences. So I think especially in the arts, we have become entirely obsessed with the idea of talent, and not only talent, but comparing the talent of some to the talent of others. We love a divide. We love feeling exclusive. In fact, I think people like bands more when they feel like nobody else knows about the band, as if the less people that know about art, the better it is. It's exorbitantly expensive to go to concerts of global superstars in the world. You pay $300 for a ticket and there's 90,000 of us all watching one person sing on a stage. Don't get me wrong. I think that there is definitely a time and a place for worshipping at the altar of talent. And actually somebody mentioned just before the break, the idea of, if we give everyone the tools to make art, then does that diminish the opportunity for those who are excellent and have honed these skills over decades? Does that give them less of a platform? I think the exact opposite is true. If you give everybody a little bit of insight into how to create something, it gives them the context to appreciate how incredible the next level up and the next 10 levels up are. If you get people performing together just for 90 minutes, they will be even more amazed that their favorite artist can do a 2-hour concert and the songs are complex. I've had 2 ballet lessons and I think it helped me appreciate more how incredible a ballet performance is. I think if we give people the tools and the context to understand even a little bit what they're seeing, they will appreciate it more. That's a little side note. So coming back to, yes, so there are so many people coming to pub choir because it gives them a sense of freedom that they are mediocre and that is okay. I think, you know, we've put musical talent and ability in maybe a different category than we do with other skills in life. And it's really confusing to me. It's disappointing. You know, do you also not cook at all because you won't be awarded a Michelin star? Do you not exercise because you're not on track for Olympic gold? Of course not. You exercise for function, or maybe you even enjoy it. I've heard of people like that. When we do music, it's almost as if people are of the opinion if they are immediately not of an award-winning level of vocal performance, then they are doomed never to be able to perform. And so we're giving people the idea that you probably do suck. You probably sing out of tune the entire time, but it's not important in this situation. So rather than making 3,000 people come and watch me on stage, what we do at a pub choir show is flip it around. By the end of the show, 3,000 people perform to me on stage. I am the audience of one. And we flip this script. It's kind of like this, we give all of the people the means of production, except then I get to make capitalist money out of it. So it's a, it's a confusing economics ride. So this idea of embracing average drove pub choir success for a good 2 or 3 years there. We had traveled internationally. We were on our way to South by Southwest in America. We'd toured across the UK and New Zealand, pardon me. And then, of course, this is all very good and well, but what happens when singing becomes illegal? I thought that I was doing the most benign activity, you know, lovable nerd singing in a choir group with people. But then what happens when that actually becomes the most demonized activity that we can do in society because of COVID? It wasn't great for business, I must admit. But in 2020, in March, pub choir was traveling in America. Not a great place to be in 2020 of March. And we immediately had to cancel our tour. We all know this sort of story, and come back to Australia. And I remember sitting at the airport and literally seeing 20,000 tickets disappear in one afternoon. Everything went overnight. I know that you know, but it's worth saying again, it's been really shitty being a musician. It's been extraordinarily difficult. And in that moment, my entire life's work had crumbled in one afternoon. So having a lot of time for introspection on a very cheap long haul flight home made me consider, back to that list, what am I actually trying to achieve? And I think this is really the crux of what I want to communicate today. And what I think started to come up in the conversation just before the lunch break is that if we keep doing art in the same way that we have always done it just because, then nothing will ever change. I don't think that COVID reduced the amount of respect in our society that we have for the arts. As somebody just said before, it was already on the way down. It just highlighted unarguably that there is a big disparity in the way that the arts are treated. The urgency of the return of the arts is not equal to the urgency of the return of sport. I'm sure we can all agree on that much. And so sitting on that long haul flight, I thought, what am I even trying to achieve? And really at the core of it, it is making people feel connected and giving them a space to be terrible with no consequences. I just realized that what I really wanted to do, just before I started talking about this transition to the online choir, I'd love to show you just a tiny clip of pre-COVID pub choir, because I think it's really important to add into this conversation that regular people were buying tickets to a choir show and they were actually doing a good job at the end of it. So I know it sounds really loved up and, you know, like platitudes, oh, everyone can sing and stuff. But actually, if you give very precise and achievable instructions to groups of ordinary people, if there are enough of them, they will do a really good job. So let me just show you what pub choir looked like before COVID. I'll share my screen again. I hope you can hear the sound, but let's see. I'll just share that. Let me go to the next slide. So this was one of the last shows we did in Australia before COVID. It was just at the end of 2019. This is at Christmas, and there were 3,000 people in the room singing a Savage Garden song called Truly, Madly, Deeply. I think it's really important at pub choir to give people songs that they've already heard before, because then they feel like they're already achieving something. They don't need to worry about the repertoire. I also arranged a score for a string orchestra, one of Queensland's best string orchestras, because I think it's really great for even drunk people to have the joy of performing with a world-class, orchestral instruments. So this is just a little bit of the performance, Truly, Madly, Deeply. Okay, I wish I could watch that. I love watching that. Okay, so who are those people? I don't know who they are. And you'd be lucky if a handful of them are professional singers. Regular people really can work together. What I think that works about it, and I won't go into like the pedagogical approach. I don't think that's the conversation that we're having, but you can ask me about it afterwards if you like, on how we get that product. But what I think is really great is this embracing of the average, because in that crowd of just people, I don't know who they are. Some people are singing flat, some people are sharp, some people are coming in early, some people are coming in late. And the overall effect is this larger average where it's just fuller and richer and more complex than perhaps you would think a choir should aim to be. We often aim to just emulate the same sound and blend together as one voice. But there's no attempt to blend. Everyone sings loudly and everyone helps each other. And if you forget your line, then the person next to you will help out. Okay, so that's where we're sitting, right at the peak, just before COVID happens. So on that flight home, yes, thinking, I think that people can still have the feeling of being connected to one another. And I think that they can still express their terrible voices, and we don't need to be in the same room as each other. And this really was a revelation. I know that you have seen virtual choirs since the pandemic. I think we're all sick of seeing, like the sheen has worn off seeing things happen virtually. I know that you know that. But really in March 2020, we pioneered this kind of activity just for a little while. And it was called couch choir. It's the same idea as pub choir, regular people doing just a little bit quite averagely, and then joining them together to make something greater than the sum of the parts. But rather than doing it in real time with a live audience, which I could obviously not do, what I did was record a series of instructions where I was performing as the singer, 3 different harmonies. I put up 3 videos of one song, and I just said, if you would like to be in my choir still, because singing still exists for all of us, we're just alone, then watch one of these videos enough times until you can sing along. And then when you're ready, film yourself at home singing along with one of my videos. Send it back to me and I will glue you back together into a global choir. And that's the way the first couch choir went. I was really hopeful that maybe 100 people would do it. I do think it's a big ask. Think about me asking you right now to sing something a cappella in your house and then send me a video of that. It's a lot, right? I don't know if I would do that. It's, I think, a big vulnerable task. And yet in 3 days, 1,500 people from around the world sent in a video of themselves performing, like giving me their voice in a video that I don't know them. It's a huge trust exercise. It blew my mind. And what was even more incredible to me was that these were different people than I had ever seen at a pub choir audience. So we have largely spent time in the real world doing shows in capital cities with as many people as possible. But when the opportunity to create couch choir came around, it was a whole new raft of people. We were getting videos from people singing in their farm paddocks. We were getting videos from Kazakhstan and Norway. We were getting videos of people doing it in sign language, no singing at all. People in wheelchairs, people of all colors, people of all ages. Suddenly this looked like humanity looks like, because we had taken the humanity out of choir. It was a strange realization to have. But what became apparent was that accessibility was always possible. I just didn't care enough to work out how to make it happen. So putting these instructions and truly allowing people to respond in their own time. At pub choir, you have to respond when I tell you. That's the way it goes. I'm in charge. But with couch choir, you might have a week. We'll say, we'll give you 7 days, and any time that feels good to you, have a sing and send it back. They are no better at singing than they are at pub choir. Believe me when I say the submissions are terrible. These are so horrible, but I try not to listen to any of them because that defeats the purpose entirely. I want your average voice, because when we add it with all of the other average voices, we get this whole, rich, textured average, and it sounds incredible. I will play you a clip in just a moment. But what I will say, just to wrap up this idea and this development in the pub choir to couch choir, it wasn't just a wholesome feeling. It did actually double our audience, literally. It doubled our audience in 2020. And while those resources were free, and that's no way to make a living, what actually happened was finally the door to the private industry was open to us. There were businesses all around the world whose employees were joining in with couch choirs and then talking about it at work. And businesses were approaching us finally and saying, we have events budgets that we can't spend, and we have a workforce at home not connected with each other anymore. Would you help us? And so this collaboration with the private sector has helped this one organization survive. I do not take that for granted, but it highlights to me absolutely how we need help from the outside of the arts industry. And I don't think that help is coming from the government. They have no history, no track record in pioneering and fighting for the arts. And so I don't think that our solution is to hope that they will do that soon. The evidence doesn't look good. But what we have discovered is that the private industry is actually interested in the well-being of their employees, particularly when they're all working from home. I think that this is probably for us the way forward. To keep in a self-sustainable way without applying for grants and being knocked back all of the time and asking for donations. This is the way forward, is working with business. I will say that one surprising outcome is that I had the opportunity to put both couch choir and pub choir into a hybrid together and do a world first TV show. It was called Australia's Biggest Singalong. It was on SBS just at the beginning of June, and 200,000 people around Australia tuned in live to sing together. There is still a desperate yearning in society to be a part of something together. Despite the fact that we can't physically sweat at a pub choir event at the moment and sing together and spread our droplets or whatever, people are still desperate to connect. They feel worried about buying a ticket to a show because they're cancelled all of the time. And for the first time ever, Pub Choir has shows on sale for the end of this year that aren't sold out. It's never happened before. People are feeling very gun shy. But I do have a big sense of optimism about the future, because it has become so clear to me through my own case study that COVID has given us lots of misery, but also one opportunity to rethink absolutely everything that we do. Is there a purpose to the way that you do things, or are you just doing them on autopilot? I hope that I haven't run out of ideas, because I think that people's enthusiasm for doing things online is about to run out. And so when that happens, I worry that couch choir is certainly not a viable way to continue. Maybe businesses won't be interested in working with us anymore. And if we can't get back on the stage and do a live pub choir show, I'm not sure what's next. But I hope we need more optimism. We need more fresh ideas, and we need to start rethinking the things that we have always done. And yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to say about that. But I will say, though, I really enjoyed the robust debate. And if you disagree with anything I said, I would love to hear about it.
Thank you so much, Astrid. I was going to throw this straight open to the Q&A, but I want to ask a question first. I just wanted to know about how the choristers felt, what the impact of pub choir and couch choir was on the choristers, especially couch choir. Actually, did they email you when they sent their submissions and say what it was doing for them?
Yeah, actually, and I will show you that clip. I forgot about it, but yes, absolutely. The audience was so different for couch choir. It still is a miracle to me, actually, how these people heard about it all around the world. But we always leave a little comment box. So when you upload your video and you send it off and hope that we don't catfish you with it later or something, which we're not going to do, by the way, you can leave a little comment. Would you like to leave us a message or tell us something about your video? And people, it's like become this weird confessional. I read all of them, by the way. Some people shouldn't tell me some of those things, but on the whole, it's people saying this, I'm not exaggerating when I say we've had probably 20 messages last year saying, I think you saved my life in lockdown, which is wild to me, because it's just singing at home, like yelling into your phone. But a couple of messages from Melbourne just saying, this has helped give me a task to focus on all month. Or, these 3 singing sessions helped me mark out the progression of time. We've had people saying, I could never dream of coming to your show. I live 500 kilometers west of the smallest town in Queensland, and I could never come, and I had to drive somewhere to upload this video because we have no internet. But this opportunity to make this is really special to me. And I know I couldn't have done it without this pandemic. So I'm grateful for this experience. So it has been really eye-opening to read these messages. And yeah, like I said, to realize that there was a way to be more accessible this whole time. And, I'm grateful for the opportunity to figure out a little bit of how to do that. But here, look, I'll show you this. I'll just do a little quick bit. So I actually think that couch choir is kind of the distillation of what I always hoped pub choir would be anyway. It's people singing gently and spending time with their voice. And don't want to hear that one again. This is the first one that we did. We've now done 7 couch choir sessions. And when I look back at this one, I actually cringe a little bit because we got so much better at editing. But this is the first couch choir we did right back in March 2020. I'll just show you 20 seconds. And it includes footage of me conducting to a live music venue that is empty, just, to bring home the point as if we didn't know. Okay, here we go. Stop there. You can go find it online if you want it. But yeah, the idea of people just singing in their jammies, singing with their grandkid, holding a dog, like it's a very wholesome stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to say that all the clips that you showed just make me a little bit weepy. And that is to do with what singing together it's that sense of togetherness which was so lost during the lockdown, and that sense of social connection that somehow just comes, well, I suppose with singing together, you don't have to make conversation, but you are kind of in conversation, but you don't have to think about what you're going to say.
Actually, it's kind of an introvert's dream. Like, I know it seems like a very extroverted activity, but you don't have to talk to anyone. You are given instructions on what to do. You don't have to come up with conversation. No one is thinking about you because everyone is selfishly trying to figure out their own singing voice. You exist in a room with so many people, but it's totally anonymous. I agree. The one thing I'll say about this feeling of social cohesion as well, at the physical pub choir shows, people left on such a high that you could literally throw any cause at them and they would empty their pockets out and be desperate to turn this feeling of goodwill that they had into something tangible for someone else, like in the hope that they could make anyone feel as good as they feel in this moment. The show that I played a clip for with Savage Garden, at the end of that night, that audience had raised $130,000 for women's legal services. Like, people feel incredible about being alive and working and sharing a goal with strangers. And so this to me is not insignificant. You know, music really does have a role to play in making people feel connected and caring about each other. And, you know, pub choir raised $300,000 since 2018, and there's like 2 employees, you know, like music makes people feel good. And yes, I know.
And that's the point I want to make. So I'll now throw it open to anyone else who wants to ask a question. I'm sure there will be lots.
What I think is really interesting is that you've actually revived something that used to be a very strong tradition in Australia, and was probably been lost during the latter half of the last century. I can remember as a child on Fridays lunchtimes going into the Civic Winter Garden in Newcastle, where a radio station did a radio show which included community singing, very much as part of the thing. And similarly, a few years ago, when Elaine Chia became the CEO of the City Recital Hall, one of the things she introduced was the flash mob choir, where people could sign up to belong to the City Recital Hall's flash mob choir, and they get a text message the night before inviting them to come to the City Recital Hall the following morning around about 8 a.m. for a choir with other people, most of whom worked in the city. And the choirs were conducted most of the time by the late Richard Gill, who was an absolutely fabulous choir master. And people would come, they would sort of be there for about 45 to 50 minutes. They would then leave. And one of my colleagues, I told one of my colleagues about it, and she went, and she always felt really pumped up, really excited, really, really happy on the days she went to flash mob. And so I just think that it's terrific that you've captured, you've reinvigorated something that was really once part of Australian life that I can remember.
Yeah, I mean, singing and choir is not a new invention. You know, we've been doing that since humans have existed. What I do think has happened in the last few decades is things like talent shows, or the idea that we can publicly laugh at others' attempts of making something has become easier. And so I think a lot of people worry that to create anything is the real possibility that you will be cancelled, or you'll be shamed, or people will laugh, or you'll become a meme. You know, people are really embarrassed. And I think it's more so for singing because it's personal. You know, if you sing badly, that's on you. Your body is doing the wrong thing. If you play the piano poorly, you've pressed the wrong keys. But if you sing out of tune, you are wrong. And so, yeah, I think that started to dawn on people, this idea of shame. But absolutely, I agree. It's something that used to happen in the past, and it still feels as good today. So.
Anyone else?
No one wants to disagree. No one wants to
I-
be anti-choir.
You got me? Yeah. Great work. I've got a number of questions actually. The first one is to do with scale. And as any anthropologist will tell you, our species has dealt with numbers up to 30 very well for a long time, and numbers over 30, we begin to have problems. And the whole internet thing has created this delusion that we somehow know, 15,000 other people or 20,000 or a million or whatever it is. And my question is on that is like, how far do you think you can scale up such things, and do you want to? And so that's one important thing. I mean, the danger at the other end of everybody feeling good and pumped up and want to go do things, of course, is like, music is also, apart from feeling good, music's used for military warfare. Stadium rock, I guarantee you can get the crowd after they've watched their heroes to do pretty well anything, and you've only got to switch the dial a little bit and suddenly you're at the Nuremberg rallies. So scale, I'd like you to talk about that and the dangers of it, as well as the excitement of having all these people. The second thing is with a choir, you're right. Yes, you've got the voice, you bring it with you, and it requires no effort. But I've done a number of what used to be known as community projects, where basically you do all the work and then the community might or may not turn up and be involved with it. And the one that I recall most, in fact, it's the last one I probably will ever do, was for the Canberra Centenary in 2013, and it was a bicycle project. And as most people know, Canberra does have some sort of tradition of cycling. There are cycle lanes in Canberra. And so the remit was to make a piece based on my earlier projects where bicycles are used to transport musical instruments, or the bicycle function itself creates the instrument, or the bicycle mechanism plays an instrument, like a violin, like a drum, like pretty well anything you can imagine, a pipe, organ pipe. And so this was an unbelievable amount of work technically to get this to do it. But yeah, people did turn up and ride the bicycles and play music. And that's one example, like, where I wouldn't recommend it to anybody because of the sheer imbalance of work between the person who actually gets it done, such as your good self, and the community, who are, they'll do it if you kind of pay them and to turn up. But I think there's a lot of, what I'm getting at is I think there are a lot of illusions and delusions about what basically is a community event.
Sure.
And the other one I want to, sorry, I'm hogging time here, but I do have some examples. The other example is I have another project which is called the Sonic Ball, and it's a 3-meter high ball with interactive electronics which I've made, which goes inside it, and a crowd plays it. And this has been at various places such as Mona Foma in New York, and to open things. And basically you put a ball, first of all I had various kinds of structures about how the game was going to go with this ball. And each time it started, within 10 seconds, the crowd just took the ball and off they went. And it was like surfed around and hit. And there was no point in me ever having thought about how I was going to make a piece, how the structure should go, what was the tune going to be. And they created this ball, and the ball basically creates music as it's played. The actual bounce, the speed, the turn, the swivel, everything is transmitted as technology, and it creates electronic music. And I thought about this, and I thought, this is amazing. The crowd, which I guess we've had like 400 or 500 people play ball, they think they're playing ball, but I'm hearing it as electronic music. And I guarantee if I put on a concert of electronic music in a hall and played what they just played, they wouldn't have a whole bunch of electronic noise to them. So those are two examples of community project, the problems with community project once you go beyond voice. But sorry, that's the rave. But I would like to hear what you think about scale.
Sure. Okay, well, the ball sounds really fun. I'd love to try that. I think with scale, there is a limit actually, because we've talked about doing things at a stadium or whatever, but sound delay, it actually just becomes unpleasant at a certain point to have too many people trying to sing at the same time. We wouldn't be able to coordinate it. The largest show we've had is 5,000 people at an outdoor venue for Splendor in the Grass, which is a really fun music festival in April or something. And I think that was about it. I wouldn't want to go anymore. And people have said to me, well, what about the scale of finding someone to franchise what you do? And it's taken me a little while to really own this idea that I think I'm also good at what I do. And this is hard for musicians, I think, especially young, maybe female musicians, but all artists, I think, have this inferiority complex. Pub choir is not a description of where we meet. It's a description of buying a ticket to my show. And so with the scale, I think we won't go any bigger because we lose the sense of other. And I certainly hope we're not going to go and make a rally after any of our shows. It's very subdued sort of event. And I don't think the people who buy a ticket to a choir event are particularly bloodthirsty in that moment. And in terms of scale of doing more of it, it's really however much I feel I can manage. But at this point in time, I would do any show at all. So I would love to have any scale to discuss with you, ask me in a year. But in 2019, we did 75 shows. It was about 70,000 people around the world. And that was a little bit too much. You know what I'm saying? I would like to do a bit less than that. In terms of the delusion of people expecting more out of simple interactive community experiences, I think it is something that people are disappointed in themselves when they aren't immediately good. I talked about that a little bit at the beginning, but I think it depends on the context of what you're offering, but all we offer at pub choir is a fluidity of an experience. I certainly don't promise anyone that they'll be any better at music at the end, and they absolutely are not. They're still just as bad. They couldn't go off then and then start a choir. They have the same amount of knowledge they did when they walked in, but they had one evening of a fluid music making experience, and that's what we offer to them. I guess it depends on what the expectations of the people are. If they thought that they were coming for a beautiful singing lesson and it was going to talk about breathing technique and scales, and then they would be really disappointed. But all we ever offer is just this one isolated, fluid evening of singing out loud. And that's all I can promise them.
Thank you. Can I ask 2 questions?
Sure.
One was, as you were talking, part of me, because my background is theatre, film, television, and I was thinking, how would you apply this to theatre? And then I was suddenly reminded of, I think Julian would know this better than me, but I think that in the 18th century in English pubs, they used to have spouting nights, which were basically where people got together and they had their favourite speech from their favourite play, and they would all do them.
Yeah.
And apparently they were incredibly popular.
Yeah, they were. You could go to the theatre and you could pay to perform in a play. There's
Right.
a sketch by Charles Dickens in his sketches by Boz, where he describes this. And what I really like is that you can pay to use the props as well. So that the parts, but also the props, the crowns and the swords and things like that. So yeah, you could watch it or you could be in it.
Well, anyway, so my questions were really one was are there lessons that we can take from what you've done that we could apply to other art forms, particularly theatre in particular? And the other is that what I'm aware of, obviously, is that what you're about is the participatory experience. It's about it's about access, I suppose, and is that fundamentally different to the experience of going and watching a performance? And is there anything that we can learn from what you've done that you can apply to those to professional performances?
I might start with that last one, because actually that's something that I wrote down on a piece of paper in the last session, the idea of access versus excellence, and does one affect the other? And I think I addressed this a little bit when I was speaking before, but what I have noticed is that a lot of the people that come to pub choir have deep musical trauma. They often will come up to the show and tell me, oh, I sung once when I was 10, but I was told I was so bad I should mouth in the choir, and so I've never sung again since. Everyone carries these deep, shameful moments where they've been exposed at being bad at something, and then they carry that forever. And them coming to pub choir breaks down, it softens that memory and that experience that they are welcome in this world, in the world of arts, I mean. So I think that those two, access and excellence, are really hand in hand. If you give those people the opportunity just to access a shameless experience of the arts, they want more. The people that come to pub choir go and join their local choir. You know, it gives them a tiny insight into what is possible, and it feels so good to them. That's like a drug. They just want more. I'm not just saying that. Like, people say, oh, I've been singing ever since I came to the first one. I went immediately and I looked up our local choir. I went and saw, you know, I've been going to concerts and thinking about harmonies and whatever. You know, I think it is just a little taste sometimes that gets people really wanting more. And so I think it's kind of like a, I don't do sport things, but, you know, like they give AFLs to primary school kids all the time. You know, they have like AFL programs, so they come in and they're probably all terrible, but it's like this little taste into the world. I feel like just because I played netball for one season at school, I like watching netball now because I understand something about it. And I think the same is true for all of art. Yeah.
Do you think your people then go off and watch choirs or watch live music that they might not, when they might not have done that before?
Absolutely. But also at pub choir, I think, you know, we are singing pop songs, so it just reinvigorates their love for pop music or whatever. I mean, of course I can only make predictions or assume what would happen in the theatre world, but, you know, I guess what is it that people want out of it? At choir, they just want to sing loudly. What does an audience get out of watching theatre, and how can they have more of that on the drip line, even just on a basic level? I mean, this might be a crap example, but I know that there's one theatre ticket in Brisbane that I could not get. It would sell out all the time. It was Drunken Shakespeare. Now, I don't know if the alcohol in both my event and Drunken Shakespeare is the takeaway lesson here, but people wanted the veil of a pristine performance to be taken away. They wanted to see people be vulnerable and funny and make mistakes. They wanted to see them slip up on their words. So if you haven't seen Drunken Shakespeare, apparently one person in the cast gets absolutely tanked before the show starts, and everyone else tries to keep the Shakespearean play going, and this one person is a total mess. This is not good for our health, but it's just the idea that people were desperate to see a new version of this, you know, musty thing that they thought it was in their mind up until that point. And so, you know, take from that what you will, but don't drink to excess. But yeah, I think the similarity between my audience and that audience is that they were desperate to have something feel average, feel relatable, and not to feel so excluded from the audience and the performance. You asked me one other thing at the beginning of that, but I didn't write it down. But
it was basically the relationship between participatory performance and professional performance. And the other thing is, can we take anything from what you do and apply it to theatre as a different genre? You kind of answered both questions.
Okay.
Can I say something? Ask something? Yeah. No, just going back to sport, which I think is interesting. We've been doing some work on the industry plan, the arts industry plan, right? And somebody said, well, look at Sports Australia. And their kind of foundational principle is everybody should have access to physical exercise. So it's not about you know, that's the basis. So, and sport has that similar tension, doesn't it? You know, elite swimmers and going to Tokyo or whatever. But it is also about 8-year-olds kicking around on a field on a wet Saturday. So, and I mean, there's problems with that, because my 8-year-old got, when you sign up for the AFL, Auskick, you also get asked, do you want a NAB bank account, please? 8-year-old. So, but leaving that aside, you know, maybe that's something we should ask about culture. So if everybody should have access to some form of cultural participation, expression, whatever you want to call it, that everybody should have that access, how would that then be planned? I mean, that's a cultural policy, like we would do about art, sport or health. How would you do that? And it seems to me then you start asking very different kind of questions. And what you do is definitely part of that, you know, but it's also different aspects of people who want to go forward. You know, the person who does go to the choir and wants, I don't know, singing lessons or violin lessons or whatever, can they get them? Can they get them? Or do you have to pay a lot of money? So there's all those questions. So I think it's really good to put this participation back at the heart of debates, because there's been a lot of debates recently about, you know, participation as, can I, as a person of colour, can I as a woman, can I as a whatever, can I get into acting, television, films, music? You know, and it's a real debate. You know, but maybe we might call that distributive justice. You know, can everybody have access to the cultural industries or the arts industry, whatever you want to call them? But the other question is contributive justice. Has everybody got the chance to contribute to arts and culture? And that sets a different set of hairs running, I suppose, about cultural policy from government as well as from other things. So it's kind of a comment as well as a...
Well, I mean, I think at the heart of both of those comments that you've made is privilege. And it is a privilege to have a music education, and not everyone can have it. And I guess that's where pub choir steps in. The one thing that we all have, no matter of status, is a voice. And I think if you give everyone the opportunity to see the options, then who knows what will happen. At this point in society, not everyone has the same tools to begin with. And so we are yet to know how society would function if everyone has the same opportunity. I think absolutely, if we give everyone the opportunity to learn AFL, who knows who will come forward and change the game. I don't know, I've literally never seen a game. But who knows what artists we will foster and create if we give everyone just a basic platform. I mean, music's not even in primary schools a lot of the time anymore. Just this, hanging on the cliff edge of access would give so many people the opportunity to experience something they didn't even know exists. I mean, you don't know until you try something. I didn't know until I couldn't get into a course at university and I was forced to try conducting that it was something I was naturally good at. You don't know what exists until it's presented to you. I was just thinking while you're talking as well, I mean, sport reveres the few against the many. But the one difference with sport, well, a difference with sport is there is a measurable way to tell who is the best. Well, from what I understand, we know who the fastest person in the world is. We can measure it. There is no one who will ever win music. There is no finish line. There's no objective criteria. You can sing in and out of tune, but some people are very famous who sing out of tune the whole time. So there is only subjectivity when it comes to the arts. And so it makes it all the more crucial to me that we need to give more people access to it, because there's no answer. Everyone has to try.
I mean, can we talk, just following this to for me, natural, in medieval times, there was a thing called charivari, which was occasionally the ruling elite would allow the poor people with no power and no voice to misbehave and make a hell of a row, noise. So it's even more basic than singing, in fact, to make a noise. And this is called Charivari, and it kept going through the Middle Ages and sort of petered out somewhere around about 1700s, but it still kept going in more of a kind of rural areas. And it sort of hangs on today a little bit like when the married couple gets married and is leaving the church, people tie tin cans on the back of the car. And that's a sort of like a sort of the end result of this quite amazing way in which people without a voice were able to like just take on the people in power, even for one day. It's also very similar to the what's it called, Festival of Fools, in where people could basically go and piss on the altar for one day only, and I think that what you're doing, I was talking earlier about the danger of that ending up in the Nuremberg rallies, but in fact if we wanted to change things, which I think most of us here do, I mean, imagine the sheer terror of the people in Canberra at Parliament House if there were like 200,000 people around surrounding the building making a hell of a row until we got action on climate change.
Yeah, well, a whole bunch of women rocked up to Parliament and they didn't even come out. So I don't know, but we'll
Yes.
I think we made a hell of a noise.
Well, can I just come back just for the last, because I was going to jump in it, and actually I was thinking of that the Nuremberg rally aspect, if you want to call it that, and I think getting everybody one day a year or whatever to sing, you're doing it more than it, that's great, and it can easily be just shunted off to that kind of safety valve, or just let your head down. But thinking about what it really, the full participation, what's the next step? So I think these ideas, your ideas and other things similar to this, that you can go into a place and just do it for all the reasons you explained so really well, which I completely agree with. But what's the next step if you want to take it? And I don't mean that as a criticism for you, but for cultural policy, whether that's local government or national government, what is the next step? What would happen if there was a real audit of who is able to do this, on what basis? Where's the community centre? How much do you have to pay for music lessons? Why is it all just in private schools? That's a really radical transformation, because it's not just, isn't it good seeing all these people in the pub? What happens if you take those principles and begin to really make them count? And I think this is where we get back to, going back to, what's his name this morning? I forgot his name, the economist, John Quiggin, about the 30 glorious years. Some of that period, there was a real sense of expanding social and cultural citizenship, and that's been taken away from us. And I think what you're doing, if you want to start getting political about it, one way is Nuremberg rallies, if you like, but another way is a real transformation of what cultural policy is as a mass participatory activity, going on to the high end, if you like, the highly professional end. But so there is a real radical thing there about what's the next step, who can take the next steps, how many next steps are there, what kind of resources have to be made available if people can take those steps. I think it's quite radical.
And on that note, I'll just break in here because it's tea time. But I just wanted to say before we go to break that thank you, Astrid, for a really fantastic presentation. Really enjoyed it. I just want to add to this idea of access, because what I really wanted us all to take away from, well, this is really like the climax of my design for the day, was Astrid's presentation, which is showing us that art is not, it's not about access. Art is an essential service. If you have people writing in saying, couch choir saved my life, you can't say it more clearly than that. So I think what we really need to do is to adjust out the way we think about art and start putting it in the same basket as medicine and firefighting and all those other essential services. That's how we need to start thinking about art. However, it's time for a cup of tea. So we will reconvene in half an hour at 4 o'clock.
Okay.
And then Julian and Ian are going to wrap up the day and we'll close.
Okay.
But,